Howdy out there in YouTube land. This is TUBALCAIN at your service one more time. And I'm about to embark on one of my longer videos, one of my longer projects, when what I will do is take a piece of hard rock maple, this piece here, and magically turn it into a soft lead hammer. So stick with me now as I take you through the many steps that it took to do that, and be sure and watch all 5 or 6 parts of this video, which is at least 2 hours in length, and hope you enjoy it and would like to see your comments, and be sure and watch my hundreds of other videos. Howdy again, this is TUBALCAIN, and in this video, and it's going to be a long one, I'm going to digress a little bit here on my metalworking, and I'm going to do a little woodworking and pattern making first, and it's going to end up into a metalworking project. And the whole emphasis on this video is to make a mold for lead hammers. And I want the hammer head to look about like this. This is a commercially made one, and I think that's about a 3-pound hammer. And of course my handles will not be fancy cook handles like this, but they're going to be a 1/2-inch black pipe, so it'll be that diameter. But what I need to do on this video and in this project, and it's going to be a long one and an experimental one, but I am going to make a wooden pattern like this. This was a little experiment I did yesterday. That's a split wooden pattern made of maple, turned on the lathe. And from this, I plan on making a plaster impression. And let me grab that for you to show you. In other words, I molded this is a molding plaster. I molded this from this. And that's just half of it. I got to make another one too. This is very brittle and delicate, plaster of Paris you might call it, or molding plaster. And see how nicely that fits? And when I get both halves made and taper them off and do all kinds of other little jobs that I need to do, I will then put these into the foundry sand out in my foundry in the garage, make a mold, and in turn produce this. Now that's stuck in there now until I put a screw and pull that back out. Pretty good fit. This is still wet. It's hard, but it's green. And I will make a 2 halves that will fit together. These will be the registration marks. And if that is successful, I will have a mold made of aluminum, cast aluminum, in which I can in turn pour lead hammers. There will be a gate here to pour the metal into the cavity, and another passage right here to lay the pipe in, and the pipe will go in, you know, way about that far and extend out 8 or 10 inches, whatever length I decide to make it. I will pour the lead in here, have 2 halves, open it up, and I will, ta-da, have a lead hammer. Now will this work? I don't know. This side, this experiment here was semi-successful. If it is a failure, I will go to plan B, which is a type of urethane that I will use to make this, which is far more expensive than molding plaster. I want this hammer head to be about 2 3/4 long, have a major diameter of 1 3/4, minor diameter near the faces of about 1 1/2, and that'll be a 6 or 8 degree taper. I think I'm going to make it 6 from each side. This is the maple that I'm going to be using, and I've already cut it to length, split it, and what I will do now, the 2 nice sanded surfaces, and I don't care about the saw marks, that's going to be turned off, will be glued together, but I will glue it together with a piece of paper in there like that, using common yellow glue. Let it set for an hour or two, and then it is ready to turn on the lathe. But before I turn it on the lathe, I will drill center holes in both ends. Now what I've done also before I've glued it, and I find out that this is kind of necessary, I found the middle and then I filed a notch with a 3-corner file. That's not a 3-corner file. Where did I put it? Right here. And a corresponding notch in the other one, so that after I have it glued together, and those should coincide, I'm going to drill center holes, and I would like the drill bit to follow that, so the drill bit is exactly halfway in one piece and halfway in the other on both ends. Sometimes with wood a drill bit will drift a little bit, and if that happens, in the end I will end up with my 2 halves, but one half will be slightly thicker than the other half. I don't want that to happen, so that's why I'm taking that extra care there to drill my center holes. So I will now glue it, clamp it, and see you after the glue dries. It's 2 hours later. The glue is dry, I think, or dry enough. Now I am ready to drill the center holes, and then put it between the centers and start turning. I'm at the drill press. Note how I've held the work, and I am center drilling both ends. These 2 holes will be for wooden dowel pins that will register the 2 halves. So I will glue a dowel in there, and these holes don't go all the way through. They go about as far as my thumbnail here. I will glue those in before I start turning, but they will only be glued into this top piece, not into the bottom, I hope. Now these dowel pins are cut to length. They're beveled on one end, marked with a pencil, and that's how far in I'm going to push them with the glue on. Now I'm going to let those dry. I'll saw them off, and it's ready to turn. The glue has dried. It's a new day. I'm sawing off the stubs. They would also turn off just as well on the lathe, but I'd rather do it that way. Now I'm ready to start turning between the centers. Now a dog will not fit on this properly, or it would be most awkward. So I'm going to do a little modification of that. So let's go over to the Atlas lathe and check that out. As you can see, I'm going to turn between the centers, and that is actually my spring-loaded concentric center back there in a sleeve, and it's just the right length. I had to fiddle around to find a center that came out just the right amount, but not so far out that I couldn't get a little bit of a grip with the 4-jaw chuck. And I marked that with a T. That's the tailstock end. Remember, there'll be some waste stock up here that I never will turn down, and that's also my prying point. So what I do is I got that on the center there, and now I'm putting it on the tailstock center. Got to back that tool out a little bit, like that. Lock the tailstock, and put a little pressure on that, because I get a spring-loaded live center on both ends now, which is a little bit different. Lock that. I know I got a lot of quill sticking out, but I don't care because there's no force on this work turning a maple. And then, using my handy dandy knobs here that I've shown in another video, all I'm doing is lightly bringing the jaws up against the work. Let's rotate this now. Got to back it off some more yet. And then I'm tightening the jaws also in this direction. Again, I always like to use 2 knobs or 2 chuck keys. Works great. So those are snugged up. It is now ready to turn. There will be some of you that disagree with me turning wood on a metal lathe, but I always do it. I do not like woodworking lathe. I do not own one. I believe you have virtually no control, especially I have no control with a chisel as far as diameter and all of that is concerned. So I will be turning this down to 1 3/4 diameter, as close as I can to the chuck, which is the waste stock. And it doesn't matter to me whether, whenever it comes to a full round and I get all the flats off, that's probably my final size, but it should be about 1 3/4 if I have calculated correctly. Now there's always some splintering at first as you knock off the corners, and those could have been sawed off or planed off, but I just soon turn them off and be done with it. Starting to get round. I'm taking a healthy cut with a power of feed. It's a very sharp facing tool, is all it is, but I resharpen it so it's very keen. Remember Mr. Keen on radio? It's starting to round off. Yeah, that program Mr. Keen, remember his assistant would always say, "Saints preserve us, Mr. Keen." And I would have to ask my dad what that meant. Alright, I'm already down to final diameter. Now, turning these dowels down across the end grain, that really tears them up, plus they're a softer wood, so I will fill that just a little bit before I sand it, and it really has to be sanded smooth. So now I'm going to start putting the taper on. I've done a little layout now. The black part on each end is waste stock. That line is the true middle. Now I'm going to taper it from this point where the waste stock starts 1 inch from each end. So there'll be a cylindrical portion in the middle, which will, I think, give it better appearance, and that will also serve as a untapered spot that I can hold in the 3-jaw chuck for facing to length and to give me my end angles. I have to think this through because this isn't something I do very often, and the order of operations is pretty critical. And you know what? My old buddy here, the Joker, is watching over my shoulder, and he hasn't made an appearance in quite a while, but he's still around with that fiendish grin. What I've done now is I had already turned down this end here a little bit. It is the waste stock. I wish I wouldn't have done that yet. I would have had a little more chucking surface here, but I put the 3-jaw chuck on, and the live center is still back in there, so I'm still holding it between centers but gripping it to keep it from spinning with the chuck. I knocked the corners off of this with the bandsaw, and I'm going to take this waste stock down so it is the same diameter as this, because I will be chucking from this end later on. I've turned it down here now, so again, this is waste stock here, everything that's been blackened. Are you following all this? I'm probably showing too much. I'm kind of winging it on some of this too. I reversed it. Tightened the chuck on this end, holding it by the waste stock. And so the actual hammerhead now is just between this shoulder here and up to the black up here. And now I am going to mark it 3/4 in from each end, and that's the part that I'm going to taper 6 degrees. I venture a wild guess that some of you out there have no idea what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, and kind of feel that way myself, to be honest with you. But alright, I just turned this end down. This is the waste stock on this end. That's waste stock on that end. That's for chucking purposes. And now you can visualize that's the actual length of the head of this pattern for the lead hammer. And this is the tapered portion right here. And right here I have set the compound for 6 degrees, and it's toward me. I can't taper it with the compound pushed away from me because it'll interfere with the tailstock. So I'm actually cutting my taper here rather than here. And then to do this side I'll have to reverse it in the lathe. But is that clear as mud? Now I will be cutting the 6-degree taper up to this layout line there. I better darken that a little bit. And I want to leave a little bit for sanding. I've already taken the first pass, and I'm doing that again by the compound rest method. Remember that method? There's 3 methods of turning a taper. I am dangerously close to the chuck. I hope I don't see sparks flying when I strike those jaws. Safe. Now I'm coming right up through that line. Just a little more. And this will already be my final cut. Doesn't take much. Can you see the taper forming? Dangerously close. And that'll all be blended in with 10 grades of sandpaper, because it's got to be smooth. Now I'm going out for a day of playing with my buddies. Before I leave, and it's still only 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to put just a little bit of putty on these so it hardens. I thought I had some spotting glaze. I don't know if spotting glaze will work or not, but my tube of that was harder than a rock. It's been that long since I used it. But this end grain here, where the dowel pins are on, is a little bit troublesome. Now on this close-up view here, I think you can see now the taper on this end. Are you following this? It's 2 days later and I've been busy. So I'm finally getting back to this, and you can see I put some Bondo on here, and I'm going to take another cut across that, but I suppose that'll take most of the Bondo off. And then I'm going to reverse the work, flip-flop it in the chuck, and put the taper on this end. The workpiece has been flip-flopped end for end, and now I'm tapering this end. As you can see, this is a long and laborious project, especially for what it is, doggone lead hammer mold. And I can't show every step, there's too many steps. I must have 10,000 sheets of abrasive paper, and this is for woodworking here, so I got some, what is this? This is 100 grit. This is the coarsest I'm going to use. This is 150, and then I've got some 220. They call it very fine, but I also got some 320. That's white. It does say it's for wood. I thought it was for metal at first, but it won't clog, it said. Well, we'll see. So I'm not going to show that, but I'm going to sand with these 4 grades of sandpaper, and that's still while I have the waste stock on the ends. 15 minutes has elapsed. Smooth. It's very smooth. I like the feel of wood. Now again, we got waste stock on both ends, and part of the purpose of that, besides holding the work, is so that I can split the pattern now. Remember, this is 2 pieces. See the parting line? It's 2 pieces. So I'm going to drive this old pocket knife here that I don't care 2 hoots about. I'm going to tap it with a lead hammer, make that brass. This is the lead hammer. Right into there. Now if I didn't have the waste stock on here, I probably would have some splintering or damage to this. Remember that that is a combination of glue and paper, so hopefully it's going to separate. Pray for me.